and, calling on the Chinese not to hype this up. But we have seen in recent weeks, and even through one comment from Biden himself, that there is some unease about this. And I think a lot of it comes down to not just the sort of unusualness of this visit. I mean, the first time in 25 years an American political figure of such stature, but also the timing. At the time when the war is going on in Ukraine, the United States is in a dramatic standoff with Russia, and the whole West is part of that as well. And supporters of this visit say that it's exactly in that kind of situation that you have to show solidarity with Taiwan. The situation in Ukraine really exposes the vulnerability of Taiwan. It really kind of casts a light on the risks that Taiwan faces of potential invasion by China. And the counter-argument goes, no, well, this is exactly the time that you shouldn't be doing anything to potentially provoke China into taking some kind of steps to, kind of a show of force in response to this, and that the United States cannot afford to have two simultaneous crises with its biggest two rivals in the world. It is simply not in a position to do that, and therefore stability is called for and restraint is called for. So those are kind of the arguments that have been going on in the US in the last few weeks.
It's a really interesting point you bring up there, Richard. Zachary, I want to ask you then, for the view from Taiwan, how are people in Taipei looking at the war in Ukraine and Russia's invasion? Do they see that in their own local circumstances?
A lot of people saying that they see Ukraine war as an example, like Chinese might send military aircraft to Taiwan as well. So they see it as an example. But actually, Taiwanese people are very used to China's threats in the past few years. So they don't really think like China would attack Taiwan. I've spoken with local people on the street. They actually don't show any concerns regarding the threats from Beijing.
Well, China has made very serious comments. They've said the U.S. is playing with fire, that it will pay the price. Zachary, you say people aren't worried on the streets. Do they think that there will be some kind of at least political or economic consequences from this?
Well, in fact, those Taiwanese companies already suffered from a ban which has placed by China this morning, that China has already placed this ban on products importing from Taiwan. Some Taiwanese company might face big losses from this ban. So, in fact, even those people, they don't have any concerns about Chinese threats from Beijing. They actually suffered.
So, Richard, it sounds like the U.S. doesn't have any interest in really testing its relations with China at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the U.S. administration is primarily interested in stability in the region and in trying to restore stability, obviously, in the situation surrounding Ukraine at the moment. Now, we know that Joe Biden recently had a 2-hour phone call with Xi Jinping where they talked about Taiwan to a great extent. And in the course of that phone call, what the Chinese released in terms of quotes from Xi Jinping, he was saying, things like "don't play with fire." So, really strong warnings to the U.S., saying that you really have to stop this visit from happening. And I think this is going to be really a test for how this situation develops. The Chinese have put themselves rhetorically into quite a position where they've said, we really don't want this visit to happen. You have to acknowledge our warnings. If you play with fire, you will get burned. This kind of language. And that they put themselves into a kind of rhetorical corner where if you use that kind of threatening language, then you have to follow through on it to some extent. So what we just heard from Zachary is maybe a kind of a first step which came through, which is, a ban on imports to China from 100 Taiwanese companies, I think, involved in the food and agricultural sector. But there have been some other things which may be connected. There was a cyber attack on the president's website during the course of today, on the website of Tsai Ing-wen. There have been further air incursions by the Chinese into what's called the Air Defense Information Zone around Taiwan. There have been, on Chinese social media, there have been sightings of pretty heavy weaponry on the move in the city of Xiamen, which is the closest Chinese city to Taiwan. So initial signs of the kind of things that the Chinese may be doing in response to that, in response to this. But I think also it's not just a matter of what happens in the next 24 hours. It's also a matter of what happens in the next months ahead, how this affects US-China relations. The US would very much like to, try to restrain China, try to stop China or prevent China from helping Russia in the Ukraine war, for instance. If the Chinese think, well, the US is simply not respecting our red lines over Taiwan, they may have less incentive to do that. So I think what is not just we see in the next 24 hours, what is the effect on US-China relations in the next months ahead is going to be something we'll want to watch closely.
Okay, Richard and Zachary, thank you so much for those updates. I'm going to be coming back to you in just a moment. But as we await the U.S. House Speaker's arrival, let's take a closer look at those recent tensions between Washington and Beijing over Taiwan and learn a little bit more about why this trip is so controversial.
Don't play with fire. That was Chinese President Xi Jinping's message to his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden in their most recent talks. China claims the U.S. is dangerously close to crossing a line on Taiwan, with its messages of support for the island's independence. In May, Biden broke with years of U.S. policy by promising military support if China tried to invade.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made.
The SS China is the one disrupting the status quo. Over the past year, Xi Jinping has provoked Taiwan with incursions into its air defense identification zones and calls for an end to Taiwanese self-rule.
The historical mission of the reunification of the motherland must be and will surely be realized.
Beijing sees the island as a Chinese territory, temporarily occupied by the political heirs of those who lost the Chinese Civil War in 1949. Since then, Taiwan has governed itself, running regular military and civilian drills to prepare for a possible Chinese invasion.
The path that China has laid out offers neither a free and democratic way of life for Taiwan nor sovereignty for our 23 million people.
Many in the West see it as a fight between democracy and authoritarianism. But that's not the only reason why the US is involved. Taiwan is integral to US strategy to check China's power in the Pacific. The Taiwan Strait is one of the most important shipping lanes in global trade. And the majority of the world's advanced semiconductors, used in everything from smartphones to cars, are made on the island. If China successfully imposes its rule on Taiwan, that would be a big blow to the US and a victory for Xi Jinping. But he and Biden have a lot to lose. They know a full-blown war could be the worst-case scenario for both their countries.
All right, let's dive back into this with Richard in the studio and Zachary standing by for us in front of the airport in Taipei. Zachary, I want to ask what we expect from this trip from Pelosi after she touches down.
Well, we've got some itinerary released by some sources, unnamed sources from the Taiwanese government. Nancy Pelosi is expected to meet Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen on Wednesday, as well as Taiwan Premier Su Zhenchang and some lawmakers here. And also, she might probably meet some activists here who have been outspoken on about China's human rights. And this is her itinerary. And then she will go to South Korea and Japan.
Okay. Now, Richard, we've been, beating around the bush on this issue, but I want to ask you what would happen, the big question, from the U.S. and the EU, if we did see an invasion of Taiwan, of China. I mean, that's clearly the worst case scenario that you see.
Kickoff. The teams are complete for now. The coaches are confident. And the fans are hot. The Bundesliga ahead of a brand new season. Learn all about the new stars and final preparations for the season's first half.
Kickoff in 60 minutes on DW.
Hello guys, this is the 77%, the platform for Africa's youth to debate issues and share ideas.
You know, on this channel, we are not afraid to touch on delicate topics.
The young people clearly have the solutions.
The future belongs to you.
The 77%, every weekend on DW.
Red alert for the blue planet.
This isn't just drought, this is aridification.
I think we're gonna have some epic fighting here.
All over the world, water is becoming a scarce commodity.
Things just getting drier and drier, and we need more and more water.
Is our Earth dying of thirst?
There's no water at all.
Then it's like the apocalypse.
The global struggle for water.
And nothing can be done.
Thirst starts August 10th on DW.
This is DW News Asia. Coming up today, what is it like to be a Muslim Uyghur in a Chinese detention camp? An exhibition in Berlin is offering visitors the chance to experience the terror that comes with being imprisoned in a Chinese camp. I'll be speaking to the Uyghur director of the event to understand why. And in Japan, a shot at a new life. How one solitary hospital in the country is offering abandoned babies a fresh start. I'm Biresh Banerjee. Welcome to DW News Asia. Glad you could join us. It's been called genocide by the United States and the parliaments of Canada, France, and the Netherlands. And here on DW News Asia, we have extensively covered China's detention of up to 1 million Uyghur and other Muslim minorities in camps in the northwestern Xinjiang region. Former detainees have told us about torture and rape, and there have been extensive investigations into allegations that detainees are made to stand for hours on end in jail, sing patriotic songs of the Chinese Communist Party, and face beatings. Now, an exhibition here in Berlin that ends today is trying to bring all of this to life for visitors.
We pledge our loyalty.
Last line soft. We are proud and strong. We pledge our loyalty.
Everybody is Gone is an exhibition that makes visitors experience what incarceration is like in a Chinese prison in Xinjiang. There's video testimonies from Uyghurs describing their experiences, and there's also actors who make visitors sing patriotic songs, for instance, to understand just one of the forms of coercion inmates have to go through.
Let's do that again.
And joining me now in the studio is the director of that exhibition, Muqaddas Mijid. Muqaddas, welcome. What are you hoping to achieve with this exhibition?
What we're hoping to achieve with this exhibition, or like this immersive journalism, as we call it, is to really invite audience members to feel for themselves how it looked like to live in a very heavily surreal state. Because usually when you talk about these camps or like prison system or like even like the general surveillance in the region, people will look at you like this doesn't exist. We're in this 21st century. But that do exist, and by inviting people, we want to share this experience, this embodied experience.
And what does that build up to? I mean, because if you're talking about change, ultimately change has to come from governments that represent these groups of people. So is that what you're looking for, or something else?
Yeah, that's the faraway ultimate goal. We would like governments like German government or like French government to act more, because there have been very few actual steps that they have been taken. But I think the changes should come also from the normal people, from like me, like you, like all the consumers, because lots of like what these situation related to Uyghur region is also the forced labor. So we wanted to emphasize that, to evoke people to, you know, like fights against, or like be aware at least of like what you're buying, what you're eating is not related to forced labor.
I have to ask you, this exhibition is being held in Berlin. How do you rate the German government's performance, or how the German government has reacted to the allegations of Chinese abuses in Xinjiang?
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with German situation, but I know that they are very close allies with China, and then they have like lots of contracts, business to do with China. I understand that. That's why German government has been like quite silenced for many years now. But I heard that there have been some petitions, some kind of movements has been happening inside of German parliament. So they try to also like raise awareness around this question, and then to ask German government to act more. But I'm like hoping that there will be more actions coming in next month, next years.
About this exhibition itself, this must feel very personal for you, because you were born in Urumqi,
yes,
the capital of Xinjiang, where a lot of these, what the world, many countries in the world have described as genocide has taken place. Do you know personally of people who have become a part of this prison system?
Yes, I have many friends who have been to these camps, and I still have some teachers, some professors that I personally know, that I work with. They are still in these camps, and we don't have any information about where they are held, or like what are the prison sentence, or like what is their fault to being held in these camps. I'm thinking about Rahila Daoud. She was one of these very interesting anthropologist, very important anthropologist who worked on Uyghur culture, and she's been held in these camps that we don't know what's going on. There's also Parhat Tursun. He's a poet, and I'm like trying to advocate for his work to be known, to be shared in my artistic work. Right. And he's a poet, and he's a writer, he's an educator. He's held in these camps. We don't know what's going on with him.
You're a Uyghur artist yourself. How does that make you feel, knowing that people who are like you are in these camps?
It's really devastating. It's also scary for me, and I'm really stressed out about the situation. By holding these people in these camps, what Chinese government is eventually doing is to, you know, like really restrict our voices. So it is as if like my voice is taken away when I think about these people in camps, in prison.
I think the last time you were in Xinjiang was in 2013, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Would you like to go back to Xinjiang?
I cannot even think about it, because it's really, I don't know how I will be received there by the Chinese government, because as I said in my testimonials, I'm not a very active person. I do artistic work, but even though I do like really few activism, but it's still talking about the issue, making artwork to raise awareness. So I'm assuming that I'm a problem for Chinese government. They don't want me to talk. They don't want me to make artistic work. Right. So going back might create some great danger for me, for my friends and my family.
It's quite a predicament to be in, but we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in. Muqaddas Mijid, director of the exhibition Everybody's Gone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
In Japan, like in many other Asian countries, an unwanted pregnancy can lead to a lifetime of social exclusion for mothers. Many are forced to abandon their babies. One hospital in the island nation decided to do something about it. GK Hospital in southern Japan is now the only place in the country where mothers can safely leave their babies and give them a shot at a better life.
Student Koichi Miyatsu was just a bewildered toddler when his mother placed him in the hatch at GK Hospital in southern Japan's Kumamoto. He still keeps the things he was wearing on that day. For 15 years now, the clinic has been the only place in Japan where a child can be anonymously and safely abandoned by desperate family members.
The
day I was left there was the day a new chapter of my life began. I think it was good that I was given to the baby hatch. Because I was given to the hatch, I met my current parents and now can live like this. I'm grateful for it. I owe what I am today to the baby hatch. GK Hospital sees the hatch as a way to prevent child abuse and deaths in Japan, where police recorded 27 child abandonments in 2020. At least 57 children died from abuse the year before. GK's head doctor says children abandoned at the hospital include those who were the result of prostitution, rape and incest. The mothers have nowhere else to turn. There are women out there who are ashamed that they did something horrible by getting pregnant and are so scared. For these women, a place like ours, which makes them think even I will be welcome, counts a lot, I think. The Catholic-run hospital opened its baby hatch in 2007, modelled on a German scheme. In all, 161 babies and toddlers have been dropped at the hospital. Some people have criticised the baby hatch for undermining the right of children to know their origins. Others say it encourages the abandonment of children. But for Koichi Miyatsu, seen here with his adoptive parents, the hatch was a lifesaver. I may still be missing a few pieces to understand who I am. My life before the baby hatch was important, but my life after the hatch is far more important. Years later, he learned more about his origins, including that his biological mother was killed in a car accident 5 months after his birth. He keeps a framed picture of her. Now Koichi wants to give something back. Every month he provides free meals to underprivileged children at a local church. He wants to work with children in the future and perhaps become a foster parent too.
Researchers in South Korea have developed an electronic tattoo that can help monitor people's health. The tattoo is drawn on the skin using a special kind of ink. The technology is at an early stage, but scientists hope it will eventually offer a new way of keeping tabs on heart rates and other vital signs.
This tattoo is more than beauty. The butterfly can monitor your health condition. The South Korean researchers call the innovative technology e-tattoo.
With this technology, we can measure various types of signals coming from the body. For instance, we can measure ECG or biomarkers in sweat, and also we can use it as heater for physical therapy treatments.
Easy to apply, the e-tattoo consists of a special metallic ink. The researchers use a soft silvery metal which is also employed in thermometers as a non-toxic alternative to mercury. Combined with platinum-decorated carbon nanotubes, the material conducts electricity. This is the way how the body signals are translated to a connected machine.
The current limitation to this technology is that we had to use wiring to acquire the signal. So in the future, what we hope to do is connect wireless chip integrated with this ink so that we can communicate or we can send signal back and forth between our body to an external device.
After wearables, e-tattoos are the next generation of body enhancement. And if you want to stop health control, just take some soap and wash the tattoo off.
Healthy tattoos. That's it for today. There's more from the region on our website, dw.com/Asia. And you can, as ever, also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're back tomorrow at the same time. We'll see you then. Goodbye.
Our interest, the global economy. Our portfolio, DW Business Beyond.
Here's a closer look at the project.
Our mission, to analyze the fight for market dominance. Get a step ahead with DW Business Beyond. A vibrant habitat and a glistening place of longing. The Mediterranean Sea. Zineb El Masrar and Jafar Abdul Karim drift along, exploring modern lifestyles and the Mediterranean ease. A Mediterranean journey in 10 episodes starts August 14th on DW.
You're watching DW News. I'm Claire Richardson in Berlin. A warm welcome to our continuing coverage of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's controversial trip to Taiwan. Now, Pelosi is due to land imminently. We are tracking that for you, and officials are expecting her to stay overnight. China has said it would view any visit to Taiwan as a provocation and could take strong action in response. Now, Beijing views Taiwan as its own territory. The Biden administration is against the stopover, but says Pelosi has the right to visit. So we've got team coverage of this event. DW correspondent Zachary Lee in Taipei standing by for us at the airport, awaiting Pelosi's arrival. And with me here in the studio is Richard Walker, our chief international editor. Thank you so much both for your analysis. Richard, I want to start with you. We've heard from the Biden administration that they did not want Nancy Pelosi to go on this trip. Why is she taking it despite those warnings?
Well, the messages have been a little bit mixed from the Biden administration. So the most recent comment from the administration, from the spokesperson for the National Security Council and the White House, really trying to tone things down, saying that a trip like this has happened before 25 years ago in the late 1990s, that passed pretty much without incident, that Pelosi has every right to go there, that many US lawmakers go there, and calling on the Chinese not to kind of blow this out of proportion. But we do know that behind the scenes, the Biden administration has been concerned about this and has been trying to persuade Pelosi not to go ahead with this trip, which has been planned for some time. She wanted to go in April, but got a positive COVID diagnosis. And the argument essentially between, those who are in favor of the trip and those who are against really centers on the timing and the situation that the world is in at the moment with the war going on in Ukraine. And supporters of Pelosi's visit say, well, this is the time to show solidarity with Taiwan, that Taiwan is really seeing in the Ukraine war a scenario that could potentially play out there with a bigger neighbor invading and trying to take over. And this is the time to show Taiwan that it has very high-level US support. And opponents of the visit say, no, that this is an extremely sensitive time, that provoking China into taking what could be, potentially dangerous actions as a show of force to show its objections to this, that would be foolish, and that the US can ill afford having a crisis with both of its major rivals, Russia and China, at the same time.
Okay, I understand we have some live pictures coming in. I want to see if we can pull those up for you. There we have it. U.S. plane landed. I know many people have been tracking an aircraft on Flight Radar, this aircraft tracking service, to see Nancy Pelosi's progress after her departure from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Richard, your first thoughts?
Yeah,
she's landed.
People, hundreds of thousands of people have been trying to track this flight over the last few years, bringing down some of those services which track flights around the world. And there was speculation during the first hours of this flight about whether she might actually not be heading to Taiwan, because she certainly wasn't taking a direct route from Malaysia to Taiwan. Instead, she tracked pretty much straight east, but it seems that she wanted to avoid crossing the South China Sea and potentially going into any airspace where the Chinese military might try to intercept or interfere with her route in some way. So instead, they tracked east and then headed around the back of the Philippines and up to Taiwan. And only just landing now, as we've just seen them land now. But we have had reports from CGTN, that's one of China's state-run media, reporting that Chinese Su-35 fighter jets are currently crossing the Taiwan Straits, with no further comment on that.
Would that have been expected?
But I think this is the kind of steps that we can expect to see from China over the next 24 hours or so while Pelosi is in Taiwan, kind of muscle flexing a show of force from the Chinese with aircraft. And we've also seen movements of ground forces around on the coast in the city of Xiamen, which is the closest city to Taiwan. So obviously the US will be watching extremely closely what the Chinese are doing there. And what kind of a response really China comes up with. Because in the last few weeks, and including very publicly, but also in a call last week between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden, the Chinese have been extremely forthright in their opposition to this visit, saying that, those who play with fire will be burned. Statements like this, and always remaining in the world of kind of metaphorical language, but pretty harsh language. So now that she has ignored all of those warnings and gone ahead with this trip, the question is, well, to what will the Chinese now do to follow through on that language? And how far might they go? Are they willing to risk provoking a kind of crisis between them and the United States at this time?
We see all officials there standing by, waiting for Pelosi's plane to arrive. If you're just joining us now, we've got U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has landed in Taiwan, as many expected, despite China's threat of serious consequences. We're tracking this story for you. I do want to get across to our correspondent, who is also standing by at the airport in Taipei, has been awaiting the arrival of Nancy Pelosi. Let's see if we can get across to Zachary Lee. Hi, Zachary. How are people in Taiwan feeling about Beijing's reaction to this? Are they worried?
Well, actually, I'm now at the Taipei airport, and there are a lot of people here. They are welcoming Nancy Pelosi's trip here in Taiwan. As we got the latest information from Taiwan's foreign ministry, we got notice that they state that there will be an important distinguished guest arriving at Taiwan at around 10:30 p.m. local time. So apparently, it could be Nancy Pelosi. And speaking of the concerns about China's threat, I've talked to some local people here on the street. Surprisingly, those people actually are now worried about China's threat. It seems they've been facing China's threat or hearing about China's threat for years. So to local people, they are actually not concerned about any threats from Beijing.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Zachary Lee. We are watching the deboarding of the plane that has just landed in Taiwan, awaiting the arrival of Nancy Pelosi. Richard, can you spell out for us just briefly why Taiwan is so important for the United States and China? Why the immense interest in this?
Yeah, sorry, Claire. I'm just trying to kind of pick out who we can see there. It's an incredibly dark shot, isn't it, of the people coming down. But it doesn't look like Pelosi herself has arrived just yet. But we'll keep an eye on that just to see. And also, to
see the
to
media
see what kind of a reception she
ready
gets.
for her arrival there.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Taiwan is really the kind of unresolved kind of crunch issue between the U.S. And China, which has been in this kind of very unusual kind of ambiguity gray zone for a good 40 years or so, ever since the US and China actually started having official diplomatic relations back around the 1970s, early 80s. So from China's perspective, Taiwan is part of its territory, that there is only one China and that this China is ruled from Beijing, and that China has every right to what it calls reunify with Taiwan, and that it prefers to do so by peaceful means, but that it reserves the right to do so by force. I think that
we may
be,
just see her coming down.
Yeah.
All right, I believe we are seeing Nancy Pelosi coming down, who's just deboarded the plane after arriving in Taiwan. Remember, this is the highest level visit by a U.S. official in 25 years, coming at a very sensitive time. I want to get back across to Zachary Lee, who's covering this for us from Taipei. Zachary, a lot of talk about U.S. and China positions here. What do people in Taiwan want to see from this visit?
Again, Nancy Pelosi would be the highest-ranking U.S. politician to visit Taiwan in 25 years. And as an isolated entity, democratic entity, Taiwanese in the global society, Taiwanese people are very welcoming Nancy Pelosi's visit here. And it seems it's a closer relations between the U.S. and Taiwan. So a lot of people here are actually welcoming her visit to Taiwan.
Richard, we were mentioning earlier that these pictures are very dark. We're seeing officials arriving to greet her. Is this the kind of reception that you would expect for such a high-level figure in the United States?
Well, yeah, I think so. So you can just make her out there in what seems to be a light pink pantsuit. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly sort of it looks a little bit more informal. I've been on quite a few of these official trips with German ministers, for instance, with Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, also, you know, a senior dignitary. And yeah, it's normal, of course, you have a special plane, and it's normal for there to be a group of people receiving then the visitor on the ground. It could be, you know, you will have people from U.S. representatives in Taiwan. Of course, it doesn't have an embassy there, but it does have a representative office to kind of manage the sort of unofficial relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan. And it would be interesting to see, but we cannot really pick out there, like, who is there from the Taiwanese side is, for instance, Joseph Wu, the Taiwanese foreign minister. It looks a little bit, I may have just spotted him there, that he is potentially there. The foreign minister of Taiwan, of course, it's very tight-lipped about this trip all through the day until we just, as Zachary just mentioned, sort of finally confirming that some high-level visitors would be coming. But obviously, with everybody masked there, it's not always as easy to recognize. But I think I see Joseph Wu, second from the left. That's potentially him, the Taiwanese foreign minister.
Now, Zachary,
on the tarmac there.
I want to get back across to you and just ask, now that we have official confirmation, we're looking at the pictures of Nancy Pelosi standing there on the runway in that light pink suit. What kind of reaction are we going to get from Beijing?
Well, as we know, Beijing has warned Pelosi's the series of consequences if Pelosi visits Taiwan. So we are expecting that there will be anger from China, from Beijing, because China has already made a lot of warnings regarding this visit. But again, in Taiwan, people don't see that there will be a military conflict. There might be some reaction from China. For example, we've learned that this morning, China already placed a ban on hundreds of products imported from Taiwan. This is from the economic side. But speaking of military conflict, I've talked to some experts, and they don't believe it would be escalate to the military conflict.
All right, and Richard, just before we wrap up, your final thoughts on this monumental visit.
Yeah, well, I mean, the next 24 hours are going to be very crucial. What kind of response do we see from the Chinese side? They've kind of talked themselves into a rhetorical situation where they have to put on a show of force. And we may be seeing that already taking place with these reports of fighter jets currently crossing the Taiwan Strait. Obviously, the question would be, how far do they go? Do they cross what's called the median line, the sort of center line of the Taiwan Strait, which would be a very rare event? what other kind of military activities, potential military exercises, or shows of force, shows of really strong objections do they put on? I think the Chinese really are under pressure, and they feel that they have to send a significant message that they have very publicly communicated in the last few weeks and especially in the last few days that they don't want this visit to happen. Pelosi has ignored those. She's gone ahead with the visit. So we can expect a certain degree of fireworks. But I think I would also stress what Zachary said there, that any thought of there's some sort of imminent invasion, I think we really shouldn't go down the road of speculating there. That is really very unlikely, but some sort of military show, of course, and of course with the amount of focus on this, the amount of US military hardware in the region, there's always a risk of some unwanted escalation. So the next 24 hours very important, but also the months ahead, what's the longer or medium and longer term impact on US-China relations? That's also going to be something we'll want to watch.
Okay, Richard Walker here with me in the studio. Zachary Lee has been covering this for us from Taiwan. Thank you both so much for those updates. And I'm now very pleased to welcome Shi Ji-wei, Taiwan's representative here in Germany. Thank you so much for joining us on DW News. I want to ask you first, are you happy about U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan?
I'm much more happy, I'm grateful, and I'm happy, and think that happens in the right moment when China has always tried to threat USA, Taiwan, try to straight democracy with military actions. As a matter of fact, this is a normal act as a normal action between friends with democracy. Is a sign of solidarity. So I'm confident and I'm happy. Yes.
And do you think it's just symbolic, or are you expecting to see something concrete from this visit by Pelosi?
I think it's a break. Is a break with the so-called one China policy or one China principle. It's a fake news about the one China policy or one China principle, because China has been threatening Taiwan with one China policy, one China principle, and says that Taiwan is a part of the Chinese territory. It's a fake news. A democracy cannot be a part of a dictatorship, and the Republic of China is established in the year 1949 and has never governed Taiwan for one day, not even for 1 minute.
So do you see this as a turning point on Taiwan? I mean, how future-proof is the one China policy that the West has committed to and that more or less has kept the Taiwan question in limbo?
Well, you see, Speaker Pelosi has always been dedicating herself to freedom and democracy. So the visit of Taiwan today is, for me, a sign of sincerity, solidarity shown to Taiwan. And yes, I think you can call it a turning point, a very positive turning point to tell the world of freedom. Don't make any appeasement unnecessarily to China. They won't appreciate it. And they try to stop it with threatening with military forces. You have to answer. We have to answer it with justice. And I think it's not a collision. It's not a collision between China or the Taiwan. No, between China and USA. It's a collision between two value systems, a world of dictatorship and a world of democracy. They just don't know China. They just don't know the separation of powers, executive, legislative, and judicial power. That's normal in USA, in Germany, in Taiwan. So the president cannot give order to the speaker, Pelosi, and said, you visit Taiwan, you don't visit Taiwan. And that's for me, that's a collision of two value systems. And I think after the break of the invasions wars of the Russia into the Ukraine, the world, and that means the world of freedom, German, France, USA, Japan, and Taiwan, we have to stand together. United we stand, divided we fall. And I think that's a very, very positive turning point. Is also, and for me, is also a novel decision, a democratic decision made by Pelosi. who has been...
Forgive me for jumping in. I want to ask, though, this collision of systems, you call it, has potentially very serious consequences. The government in Beijing has warned of those consequences that Pelosi's visit would trigger. What do you think that would look like exactly?
I think Beijing has unnecessarily made out of this novel visit of the congressman, of the speaker of Congress. They have turned it unnecessarily into a crisis. Just like Blinken has said, there is also a precedent of fall in 1997, visited by the Republican speaker. I think it was a Newt Gingrich, 1999. So, as a matter of fact, it's nothing new.
Now, you also mentioned the war in Ukraine. All of this, of course, playing out against the backdrop of that invasion. It's a conflict where you have a big military power that's invaded its smaller neighbor. Do you see yourself in a similar situation in Taiwan?
Yes, indeed. And I'm not the only one who sees the situation this way. The German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Frau Baerbock, who delivered a speech in the UN, and he said he wants China not to take an example on what Putin has done against the Ukrainian. And that means she will stand in for Germany not only, but also for the world of freedom. The world of freedom would and should protect Taiwan from invasion from China, because they won't be protecting Taiwan. They will be protecting a member of the world of freedom. And only in this case, we can win the war against the Chinese dictatorship, who has been strengthening not only Taiwan, but also Japan and other countries in the ASEAN League.
Xi Jiwei, Taiwan's representative in Germany, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us on DW News. We've also reached out to China's ambassador to Germany, waiting to hear back there. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you.
We're going to move on now, and Russia's Supreme Court has ruled that Ukraine's Azov regiment is a terrorist organization. This decision may allow harsh sentences against fighters who are now Russia's prisoners of war. The Azov regiment is a Ukrainian military unit with a far-right and nationalist background. It was the focus of Russia's claims about fascist elements in Ukraine. And many fought in the months-long siege at a steel plant in Mariupol. Russian-backed separatists are calling for them to be executed. I'll bring you an update from our correspondent in Kyiv in just a moment. But first, let's take a closer look at what the Azov regiment is.
This was the Azov Steelworks earlier this year. Inside, thousands of fighters from the so-called Azov regiment. From within the tunnels under the steel plant, the regiment's leaders sent out video messages.
This is our appeal to the world. This could be the last appeal of our lives. We are probably facing our last days, if not hours. The enemy outnumbers us 10 to 1.
They didn't last much longer. Ordered to surrender by the government in Kyiv, the steel plant's defenders were taken prisoner. Russian officials called them Nazis. The group does have a far-right history. It was founded in 2014 as a volunteer militia to fight pro-Russian separatists in the Donbass region. Current members have rejected being called nationalists or radicals. However, they say they're patriots. Russian media also said the group mistreated civilians in Mariupol, but without evidence. Videos showed fighters helping civilians evacuate in the days before the surrender. Since then, the captured fighters have become pawns in the game, potential assets in an eventual swap or ceasefire negotiations, as the war grinds on without them.
DW correspondent Birgitta Schulke told us about the reaction to the news that Azov fighters have been designated terrorists.